And we have established that the earmarked funds for CDF are very limited in scope to the extent that it's just the purchase of seedlings. We are making a proposal to the NGCDF board that members will be able to shift with government. We are shifting from just planting to actually planting and growing and seeing the trees through to maturity. And you cannot do that if you cannot employ some labor. And therefore, our request is that the NGCDF board would allow for proposals from members of parliament to actually engage our young people in a concept we are calling the Green Army to help us not just plant, but actually grow the trees. And I hope members of parliament, you are going to support us in that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
On that question, I'll request for him. That will be the end on that question. There's a next question on environment as well. Okay, start. Kipkelion East. Give him the mic.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, because of time you have given me. Mr. Speaker, I have a question to Madam CS concerning forest in our area, Kipkelion East, where I represent. And I want to ask Madam CS, my constituency actually covers around that 6.6% of forest in area of Kericho County. And I grew there within Sogel Forest. And when I was growing, there were people who were tending those trees. And we had a lot of seedlings. But since sometimes back they were fired and they were kicked out of the forest, and right now we have a very big empty space. What are you doing to make sure that we have enough seedlings? The other day, I tried to drill water for Londiani Forest College so that they can be able to have tree nurseries. In addition to that, Madam CS, those locals who have been actually working on those forests and also living within the forest, they find themselves when people are doing the logging or when the sawmillers are being awarded, only big four sawmillers are given tenders to come and clear the plantations, and they only remain with the sawdust. I want to ask, what are you going to do to make sure that the locals who have been taking care of those trees do benefit from that, especially our youth? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika. Swali langu kwa waziri ni kwamba ni kuhusu uhusiano mwema kati ya maafisa wa misitu na wananchi. Nauliza hivi Mheshimiwa Spika, manake kuna visa vingi ambavyo vimeendelea, wamama kupigwa, vijana kuumizwa. Hivi majuzi kwa chini ya miaka 7 hivi nimepoteza vijana 3. Na ya mwisho ilikuwa mwaka jana ambapo vijana 2 waliuawa na maafisa wa kulinda msitu. Ni jambo gani ambalo anazifanya kama wizara kuhakikisha kwamba wao wanakuwa na nidhamu na kufanya kazi kwa njia mzuri? Ya mwisho ni kuhusu miti, Mheshimiwa Spika. Kuhusu miti, Mheshimiwa Spika.
Swali moja nilikupa nafasi. Farah Maalim.
Mr. Speaker.
Question.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I want to draw the attention of the Minister that I come from the Dab constituency, where we have at peak times in excess of 450,000 refugees. And those refugees are not given any energy by the agencies, the UN being primary among them, for them to do their cooking. So they depend on depleting the environment. Has your ministry considered the catastrophe or the calamity that is ongoing there, and as far as the degradation of our own environment is concerned? And what do you plan to do in consultation or also in coordination or even forcing the agencies to make sure there is energy available for the refugees to cook their food instead of having to go and cut the trees in that very fragile limited ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you. Waziri, answer those three. We got the next question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The first question by the member for Kipkelion East, addressing the issue of seedlings. Actually, Mr. Speaker, just to say that one of the immediate tasks that we need to engage in as a ministry in the realization of the restoration initiative is to do a massive seedling propagation exercise. We have many seeds within the Kenya Forestry Research Institute, and what remains is the propagation of seedlings to meet the good demand that we are already seeing and feeling, where Kenyans are ready to plant trees, they are ready to partner with government in restoration efforts. And indeed, Mr. Speaker, to say, we are capitalizing on commercial forestry. We want to do mass production of fruit trees through agroforestry so that there would be value in individual Kenyans partnering with us in the planting of trees. And the target, we will do a target of women groups, youth groups, who we know are fully engaged in nursery propagation, and they need to be registered with the CAFRI so that we can work with them. Honorable Speaker, also to say to the honorable member, recently in a partnership with the Ministry of Water, because we have a an interministerial team that is undertaking the tree growing exercise, there is a fully fledged borehole within Londiani. It's quite new, and we are going to, through the support of the college, to do massive seedling propagation, and we are going to engage youth and women within your constituency. On the issue of only big sawmillers profiting or benefiting from the allocation of permits for the plantations harvesting, like I said, we have a proposal from a process that had been done through a multi-agency task force, which proposed that the issuance of permits should actually be in the range of 60-40%. 60 going to locals and 40% to others. And Honorable Speaker, locals would be, in many instances than not, the small-scale sawmillers. So I will oversee that to make sure that this acts as an incentive to the forest-adjacent communities to partner with the Kenya Forest Service in protecting our ecosystems. Honorable Speaker, the member for Keyo North on relations between KFS officials and the communities around the forests, I said that my ministry have already had several meetings with community forest associations in the spirit of ensuring good relations between the service and forest adjacent communities. And therefore, there'll be little or no tolerance at all to acrimony, because that will sabotage our efforts. We need the support of the communities, and any case that comes up will be dealt with a proportion of action that is required. And it is an issue that I will look into to make sure that any such specific cases will be dealt with. Honorable Farah Malim, this is a very pertinent issue at a time when we are looking at the nexus between climate change and migration issues. But Honorable Speaker, through you, I would wish to take time to investigate the issue of the impacts of the refugee camps on the environment degradation. And I have my Director General here of NEMA. And with your permission, Honorable Speaker, in the next 2 weeks, we can do a written response to the issue, because it is of concern to the ministry as well. Thank you.
You write to the clerk, and he'll pass on the answer to the honorable member. Next question, 104 of 2023, member for Mandera South.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I rise to ask question 104 of 2023. Could the Cabinet Secretary, 1, clarify whether Kenya has ever experienced any heat waves in recent years and provide details on the impact of these episodes on humans and livestock? 2, provide the status of any records maintained on critical heatwave events experienced in the country and clarify whether such records have been used to provide disaster warnings for purposes of adaptation strategies. 3, what measures has the ministry taken to mitigate the impact of heatwaves on human life and the livestock in the country? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.
Minister, I want you to take less than 10 minutes on this.
Most obliged, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, once again, a very pertinent question in the wake of the climate change crisis. And just to let the honorable members know that climate action is of high priority for government through my ministry. The President chairs the Africa Union Committee for Heads of State on Climate Change. And this September, we shall be hosting the first of its kind climate summit to address some of the issues that are arising, which are becoming a livelihood threat to not only Kenyans, but the global community. Mr. Speaker, heat waves have a very loose definition, and they are defined as periods of hot weather considerably above the average temperatures for a given time and location. And the threshold given for a given location or geographical area largely depends on the local weather conditions, the vulnerability of the people, and ecosystems exposed to heat. Honorable Speaker, it is likely that a number of perceived extreme heat events will occur in regions of the country as temperatures continue to rise in response to climate warming, with thresholds varying regionally. Mr. Speaker, if members have had a time to peruse some of the annexures to my response, they will see a tabulation of projected risks and impacts of climate change on human life, also the risks pertaining to health, and also pertaining to food security and even animals. Mr. Speaker, with regard to the issues raised by the honorable member, in Kenya, like many other sub-Saharan African countries, extreme heat events and attributed impacts such as emergency room visits, hospitalization, human and livestock deaths, and loss of productive hours are not documented, and heat waves are not recorded sufficiently. And few studies have attempted to assess changes in heat waves in various African regions. However, these fragmented studies do not provide succinct and comprehensive information for the necessary decision making. Weather conditions that could result in health risks depend on the sensitivity, acclimatization, and adaptability of the population to extreme heat. And temperatures is the main component of heat, and it also depends on various weather variables. Coming to the exact question on whether Kenya has ever experienced heat waves in recent years, research into heat waves across the world has confirmed that the increasing trends in frequency, duration, and cumulative heat have accelerated since the 1950s due to the climate change. The biggest increases have been seen in the Middle East, South America, and Africa. And they project the deadliest disasters that are getting stronger and more frequent every other day. In the recent past, Honorable Speaker, heatwave events have been recorded around the world with examples of 3,000 people dying in the United Kingdom, 300 displaced in Italy, 600 people dying in Spain. Mr. Speaker, chronic exposure to extreme heat in the form of seasonal and year-round extreme heat, especially in tropical regions, have far-reaching impacts on health, productivity, and economic outcomes. Generally, public perceptions and awareness of heat in Kenya are very low, and there is therefore need to raise the awareness of heat risks, especially in this country, where we have a substantive number of low-income populations. For instance, due to lack of awareness, heat-related instances and illnesses might have people underestimating these illnesses and the seriousness of heat situations and do not actually then go to hospital when they are required to go. Based on analysis of data from 1975, the year 2022 was the third warmest year on record, tying with 2021 and followed closely behind by 2019 and 2020 as the first and second warmest respectively. Intrigued by undocumented heat waves, cases and concerns of their impacts, our Kenya Meteorological Department recently conducted research to identify high-risk regions, define heat thresholds, and initiate a protocol to operationalize heatwave early warning in Kenya for early action and for purposes of informing adaptation strategies. This analysis showed that recently identified extreme heat events occurred in Kenya in March 2016, April to May 2019, March 2020, and February of 2021. The extreme episode of March 2016 lasted for at least 7 days, with impacts including increases in admission in hospitals in the cities of Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa. Another study carried out in 2022 identified extreme heat events of 1991, 2005, and 2012 over Nairobi, Tana River, and Turkana counties respectively. And most heat events recorded in the selected counties were observed to begin around the months of February to March. The study concluded that owing to the established direct relation between extreme heat events and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease prevalence, the observed events ranging from normal to very extreme have had a great negative impact on human respiratory health. Mr. Speaker, I now wish to inform the House on the link between climate change, heat waves, and drought, also known as climate change, heat waves, drought nexus. The impacts of recurrent droughts in arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya continue to worsen with significant impact on lives, health, losses in livestock and livelihoods. And it is highly likely that droughts are coupled with heat in these regions are increasing trends in temperatures have been observed in recent times. Mr. Speaker, sir, these issues highlighted do compound dry events, heat waves, and droughts, and they change dramatically under global warming, but have never been systematically studied in Kenya. However, it is feasible to state that the livestock deaths associated with long drought were spurred by extreme heat stress on the animals brought out by heat extremes, high evaporative demand that results in low soil moisture and decreased surface water availability. The need to understand the compounding risk posed by the combined effects of droughts and extreme heat events, especially in arid and semi-arid areas of Kenya, is dire. Mr. Speaker, extreme heat events interact with other factors such as exposure and vulnerability and inadequate adaptive capacity, resulting in greater impacts. The associated impacts of extreme heat events on livestock are negative psychological effects of heat stress on animals' metabolism and productivity, and indirectly via increased disease burden, reduced water availability, and inadequate pasture. Mr. Speaker, with regards to the question, to provide the status of records maintained on critical heatwave events experienced in the country, and to clarify whether such records have been used to provide disaster warning, I will say, Mr. Speaker, that the World Meteorological Organization concluded that the past 8 years were the warmest on record globally, fueled by ever-rising greenhouse gas concentrations, accumulated heat, according to 6 consolidated international temperature data sets. Mr. Speaker, the year 2022 was the 8th consecutive year between 2015 and 2022 that annual global temperatures have reached at least 1% above the pre-industrial levels. And in view of this, Kenya started monitoring heat waves from 2022. This monitoring was likewise spurred on by an analysis done in the generation of the annual State of the Climate document, which is annexed in this presentation, Mr. Speaker. And in the initial analysis carried out, examined daily data from 1991 to date and identified the following thresholds for issuing heat health alert warnings in Nairobi, Kisumu, and Mombasa, respectively, based on the historical data record. And the thresholds for Nairobi, Mr. Speaker, is that the daily maximum of 32 plus for 3 or more days then would account for a heat wave. In Kisumu, a daily maximum of 37 plus degrees Celsius for 3 or more days would equally be the threshold. And in Mombasa, a daily maximum of 36 plus for 3 or more days would also form the threshold. These heat waves identified in the historical record are all documented as described in the above section with regard to the 3 counties. As previously outlined in the KMD, KMD is working on expanding the threshold to cover many other regions in the country, which would eventually then speak to the adaptation measures required. Additional research and studies are crucial, Mr. Speaker, to determine the impacts of heat waves and other climate change phenomena on livelihoods in Kenya. In its seasonal forecast, the Meteorological Department of Kenya incorporates temperature forecasts for various parts of the country, and these serve to prepare stakeholders and the public for either high or low temperatures during the seasons. Mr. Speaker, on the 4th question, which is the measures the ministry is taking to mitigate the impacts of heat waves on human health and livestock in the country. Mr. Speaker, in arid and semi-arid regions of Kenya and in Africa at large, livestock species, particularly sheep, goats, and cattle, are typically a major source of livelihood and survival and source of food, and may be converted to cash. It supports livelihoods, Mr. Speaker. And with the change in the heat seasons, there is increased vulnerability. This therefore calls for an urgent need to develop effective adaptation strategies, including increased uptake of emerging technology, such as the Zai pits, which are planting pits that provide water-efficient farming technology and are often used in arid and semi-arid areas to maximize water utilization by crops. Mr. Speaker, on the part of the ministry, several measures to mitigate the effects of heat waves on both human and livestock in Kenya have gone into place. The first is that the Kenya Met Department has adopted the Common Alerting Protocol, standard developed by the World Meteorological Organization, to issue early warnings on the onset of events such as floods and strong marine waves, which then provide advisories for the affected communities, be it fishermen, pastoralists, and other communities. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, the KMD is in the process of implementing and operationalizing impact-based forecasting, which will serve to support evidence-based decision-making for extreme weather events, such as heat waves, both in advisory form as well as in updates and forecasts. And together with other sectors, including water, energy, health, and disaster reduction, KMD is developing thresholds of weather and climate variables to trigger response and action. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, the ministry is currently developing the National Climate Change Action Plan, which includes adaptation and mitigation strategies that respond to various impacts with regard to heat increases. Number 4, Mr. Speaker, is the partnership that the Meteorological Department is involved with Resurgence, a development partner, on a project called Daraja, where there is regular issuance of temperature forecasts, including warnings for informal settlements. And examples have been developed for Kibra and Madare based on collaborative thresholds. On collaboration, these thresholds are disseminated via text messages to communities and also radios such as Pamoja FM. And this is, the focus emanates from the fact that these informal settlements are largely impacted disproportionately by extreme heat conditions. Mr. Speaker,
Wind up.
the fifth intervention, Honorable Speaker, is that the ministry is in the process of modernizing the Kenya Meteorological Department infrastructure so that the department will be in a position to better monitor weather events. And this improved monitoring network will be the basis for development of local scale threshold to detect extreme heat episodes for early warning. And at the opportune time, Honorable Speaker, we shall be reaching out through the relevant committee of this House for the support of the House to actually help modernize and fully equip our meteorological department by turning it into a semi-autonomous government agency that can stand on its feet to respond to the need for scientific-based approaches to early warning systems for us to alleviate the effects of heat waves and other such impacts of climate change. Mr. Speaker, sir, that is one of the biggest needs within the KMD that I know will specifically be followed through the House of Parliament. In terms of recommendations, Mr. Speaker, yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm just about to finish. There is immediate need for measures to be put into place to cushion Kenya from heat waves, and one of which is to support the modernization of the Kenya Meteorological Department. And also, through this information needs to go out to our hospital managers and medical practitioners to pay particular attention to the effects of heat waves on Kenyans. And finally, Mr. Speaker, for the hardest hit regions of northern Kenya, the need to take up specific measures to mitigate against heat waves, including reduction of movement of livestock during extreme weather seasons, reduction of transportation of animals, and focusing only on movement during cooler hours of the day. And of course, Mr. Speaker, the need for alert, for people to stay alert to signs of heat distress, including planting, panting, increased respiration rate, increased water intake, so that people can then get the necessary help. With those presentations, Mr. Speaker, I conclude. Thank you.
Member to ask the question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. I think I am satisfied. Thank you, the Honorable. Thank you, the Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Honorable Member. If you are satisfied, the story ends there. Thank you very much. Minister will release you. Call in the next minister. Thank you very much. Honorable members, allow me to acknowledge in the Speaker's Gallery Taita Mauche Secondary School from Njoro, Nakuru, Kisumu University's Students Association from Kisumu, and in the public gallery, Makuma High School from Mara in Taraka, Jack Ridge School from Ruiru, Kiambu, and Samoei Boys School from Nandi Hills, Nandi. On your behalf and on my own behalf, I welcome the students and their teachers to Parliament. The Honorable Minister for Roads and Transport. Sergeant, is the minister in the building? Yes. The first question by the Honorable Joyce Kamene. She has requested, what is this? Yes. Is she here? Okay. Is Joyce Kamene in? Yes.
There was the one.
Minister for Roads and Transport, welcome to the House of Parliament. Joyce Kamene, you may ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand to ask the Cabinet Secretary of Roads and Transport. Question number 018/23. Could the Cabinet Secretary outline the measures the Ministry has put in place to provide for pedestrian footbridges along an approximately 2-kilometer stretch of Mombasa Road, especially the crossing at Hilton Garden Inn and the Syokimau Railway Station Nairobi SGR Terminus, and the stretch between Kappa Industries and the Mastermind?
Minister, you have 9 questions, and we must be done with you by 6. By 6. So I want you to give us succinct, short answers pointed to the question. There may be supplementaries that may give you a latitude to wander around, but I want pointed answers to pointed questions. Go ahead and answer the first question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to appear before this august House to answer these questions. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we have 9 questions, but as it shall appear later, I will demonstrate that the 9 questions are subsumed to 3 topics. And therefore, the rest of the issues that are related to pending roads can be collapsed and answered together. Mr. Speaker, on this particular question, allow me, Mr. Speaker, to appreciate the Honourable Member for this question, Honourable Joyce Kamene, and to note for the good of the House that indeed we have a challenge in the country when dealing with matters related or touching on pedestrians. Statistics from NTSA, Mr. Speaker, show that we lost 1,383 persons who are pedestrians, 1,557 and 1,682 in the years 2020, 2021 and 2022 respectively. It is, Mr. Speaker, saddening that we continue losing lives as a result of lack of infrastructure and sometimes recklessness on the road. The reasons are because of inadequate facilities for non-motorized traffic, including cycling and footpaths. In this case, the Ministry has prioritized incorporation of non-motorized transport as part of national transport policy. All new roads now, Mr. Speaker, being constructed will have in place footbridges, cycling paths, and footpaths. Under Kura, already, Mr. Speaker, 300 kilometers of footpaths have been done in the last 5 years. 12 footbridges have been built, 8 of them being in Outer Ring Road here in Nairobi, another spread in an identified location across Nairobi City. There is a policy to ensure road furniture and road markings. Road furniture, Mr. Speaker, the signage and the material used to protect road users are in good condition, and where traffic calming measures are used, that they are compliant with stipulated standards. The division of the ministry concerned with road standards is working with all road agencies to enforce approved configuration of bumps in the entire country. However, of great concern is the issue of pedestrians not using the footbridges anyway, even after being constructed. And Mr. Speaker, we've witnessed a lot of accidents here in Nairobi, especially in Allsops, Waraka, Outer Ring Road, City Square, and Wayaki Way. Pedestrians have an apparent insatiable appetite to defy the use of footbridges in crossing the roads. This results in the road traffic accidents being higher than they might have been otherwise. It has also compelled the ministry to erect bumps, Mr. Speaker, for example, around where the footbridge is already constructed, for example, the Uhuru Gardens in Nairobi, as a result, disrupting traffic flow. And if you use Langata Road, you know this is a big challenge. Consequently, we are working with road agencies together with NTSA to formulate a new strategy that uses digital cameras to support the enforcement of traffic regulations. We anticipate that in the next few months, we will have started a trial process using traffic cameras, especially in Nairobi, along the Northern Corridor. On this specific of 3 number of footbridges along Mombasa Road at the following locations, Mr. Speaker. Airtel Building near the Southern Bypass Interchange, Syokimau Railway Station, Katani, a few meters north of Katani Road Junction. The works are scheduled to commence on 27th of April 2023 with contract completion date of 26th October 2025. This is a 30-month contract period comprising of 18 months completion period and 12 months defect liability period. The contract sum, Mr. Speaker, is 1.2 billion and 1.2 billion. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Kamene, are you satisfied? If you are, we go to the next question.
Mr. Speaker, I just want some more clarity, because if I remember very well, there was a public participation that was done before the express highway got started. And it was agreed that there was essence of 5-foot bridges. The population, and because of the public safety in that stretch from Mulolongo to Hilton Garden. And the one which is most critical, the one of Kappa, because Kappa around there are so many industries, and the residential area, people crossing that road. There was one bridge that was supposed to be put there. What happens to that one now?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is true that during public participation there were actual requests of more than 5 footbridges. But Mr. Speaker, of course, we work within budgetary constraints. If Honourable Member is, if I got her right, she's suggesting that there was a request for a footbridge around Kappa, around Nation, in the Mulolongo area. And Mr. Speaker, the truth is that the footbridge, the one I have read in Katani, is few meters from where the Honourable Member is mentioning. Of course, it will be a bit of a walk from the exact position where she's saying, but in our consideration, it was important to start with the one in Katani junction there, as you can imagine, Mr. Speaker, in the financial constraint we are facing as a country, we've been able to set aside 1.2 billion for this exercise. In the next phase, of course, Mr. Speaker, finances permitting, we shall increase the number of the footbridges. But the Honourable Member's concern is founded on true position presented by the members of public during public participation.
Next question, 072 of 2023. I have a letter from Honorable Abur nominating Joyce Kamene to ask the question on his behalf.
Yeah, I arise to ask the question 072/2023 on behalf of the Member of Parliament, Honorable Paul Obor, Rango MP, to the Cabinet Secretary, Roads. The first one, explain the circumstances under which construction of the Riosiro Rongo University Chamgir Wodu Road has stalled for the last 2 years. The second one, state plans that the ministry has put in place to ensure that the contractor resumes construction of the said road. And number 3, further state the timeline of the completion of the said road.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I beg your indulgence. The question from Honorable Obor is similar to other 6 questions, all of which are asking one question: to explain why roads have stalled. Mr. Speaker, if in the interest of time and for the benefit of the members and for good order, you may allow me, I could address the question raised by Honorable John Juguna, which is the mother question. The mother question, in the sense, number 10, Mr. Speaker, asks why all roads have stalled. So that, Mr. Speaker, when I give the global picture...
Hold on, Minister.
Yes, Mr. Speaker.
For purposes of parliamentary record, each question must be asked. The only thing we can do is questions on stalled roads. If you have answers, we can have members specifically ask, then you answer.
Yes,
How
Mr.
many members have questions on stalled roads? Let me see. You may take your seat, Minister. Honorable Mulyungi, is your question on stalled roads? You have question 77. It's a stalled road. You may ask the question and sit to await an answer in combination with others.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to ask question number 078/2023.
77 or 78?
77 is not on stored project.
Okay, fine.
It is different.
Okay.
But the one I'm asking is a stored project.
Okay, ask 78.
Could the Cabinet Secretary provide details of total contract sum and the contract period for the construction of Gunenu Road and Nziu Bridge in Kitui County? Mr. Speaker, Gunenu Road is the one which is stored, but Nziu Bridge is not stored. It is ongoing. Number two, could the CS explain why the construction of the said road and bridge, the said road are stored for such a long time?
You are saying the same road and bridge. And
No, I've said, I've clarified, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Yes. The bridge is going on.
Okay.
But the road is
stalled.
Yes. Why it has taken such a long period, and state when the projects are expected to be completed. Number three, clarify whether there were any corporate social responsibility projects provided for the contracts of the two. And if so, provide details and timelines for delivery.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
CNN, yours is also on stalled road.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to ask this question 79 of 2023 to our young and able Cabinet Secretary for Roads and Transport. 1. Could the Cabinet Secretary explain the status of the remaining section of Kibwezi, Kitui, Kabati, Migwani, Bondoni Road, which was being upgraded to bitumen standards and as stored? 2. State when the construction of the said road is expected to be completed and the measures that the ministry has put in place to ensure that the project is not abandoned before its completion. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Peter Masara. Peter Masara, your question is also on a stalled road.
The question is on an installed bridge, Kokende Arombe Bridge in Suna West constituency.
It's not a stalled road. Okay, we'll leave it aside. Gideon Mulyungi.
Mr. Speaker, the other ones are not stored.
Clerk, how did you allocate Gideon Mulyungi 3 questions in one day? The next, in fact, he has 4. Yes. So we'll leave out Gideon 81. We go to 83, another Gideon Mulyungi. Is it on a stalled road?
Can answer, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, you can
the
answer.
The reason, Mr. Speaker, is I gave these questions at the beginning of this session.
No problem. Just proceed and answer. I didn't ask you anything.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask question number 77/2023 to the CS. Number 1, provide details on the road total contract sum and the contract period for construction of Kalisasi Mumbuni Road, Phase 1 and Phase 2. Indicate when the construction of the Kalisasi Mumbuni Road is expected to be completed. Consider extending the construction of Kalisasi Mumbuni Road to Mumbuni Shopping Center instead of the current terminus. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Go on to 81.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the CS provide a status report on the use of Nairobi Expressway since its inauguration and how it has improved traffic congestion in the city? Number 2, state when the ministry intends to improve the main Mombasa.
That is slightly different, Gideon. You can hold on that.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
We go to 83. Ask 83.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could the CS provide details of the total contract sum and the contract period for construction of Mwingi Slaughterhouse Road? Number 2, explain the causes for the delay in the construction of the said road, which is yet to be completed, including work relating to drainage, access culverts, and the reinstatement of services such as water pipes and the street lights, among others. Mr. Speaker, the road is completed, but the services which were removed have not been reinstated. Thank you.
Last one, John Njuguna, member for Kiambaa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask question number 115, 2023 to the Minister. Provide a list of all stored loads projects in the country, enumerating the reasons for the stalling of each of the projects. Question 2, provide details of all pending bills owed to load contractors in the country and explain the measures in place to settle and the status of each of the pending bill. Question 3, explain the measures that the ministry is taking to ensure that the stored works resume and that all pending bills are immediately settled. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Minister, from the way I see it, answer all the other questions, then you will come to this very broad one of John Njuguna that is likely to attract almost a supplementary from everybody. Because when he says a list of all stalled road projects, I'm sure every member has a story to tell about stalled road projects. So answer all the others. We'll finish with Kawanjiku's question.
I actually beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker,
yes,
to start with Kawanjiko's question, Honorable Kawanjiko's question, or Honorable John Njuguna's question, because once I answer that, the rest of the questions fall in place in terms of the consequence. And that's why I requested you earlier.
Go ahead.
It's like the mother question is Honorable Njuguna's question. Mr. Speaker, I will start with question number 10, then I'll come to the rest. The State Department of Roads, through its 3 implementing agencies, has an ongoing roads portfolio of over 800 projects with an outstanding cost of approximately 763 billion shillings as at 28th of February 2023, sorry. So, Speaker, the reason for the emphasis of 763 billion and the date given of 28 February is because with interest, the figure keeps changing, Mr. Speaker, as time goes. Out of this outstanding, an amount of 150 billion is related to certified works, actually 145 billion, related to certified works not yet paid. That is the pending bills. Most of the 800 projects are currently on slow implementation, while others have completely stopped due to inability of the government to avail adequate budget over the years. We note, Mr. Speaker, that some of these contracts have stalled for over 5 years and some almost 10 years, 9 approaching 10 years, Mr. Speaker. And I have provided the annex, Mr. Speaker. It will be tabled to the House. One of our officers has the annex here. And these roads, Mr. Speaker, if you allow me just for people to appreciate where it's coming from, roads like, Mr. Speaker, in Bungoma, Luahaga, Karios-Sionde, Tulienge, Sirisha, up to Chwele, Mr. Speaker, have been pending since 2017. Or roads, Mr. Speaker, like the Natu Bridge, Kagwata, Mulika Market in Meru, Mr. Speaker, which was also from 2016. Or roads like Kilgoris, Olgorian, which is, for example, Mr. Speaker, from 2020. Or roads, Mr. Speaker, like the one in Danger, Chemuswa, Cheptiret, Keses, Lesos, and Cheptiret Mo University, Makin and Hills in Nandi County, Mr. Speaker, which have been stalling from 2016. So these are just but some of the examples of stalled roads. And honorable members, a number of them have come to the office and we've discussed these issues. Contractors are owed currently 145 billion in terms of pending bills, with local contractors being owed 50 billion and foreign contractors being owed 60 billion. Part of the pending bills, Mr. Speaker, which is 35 billion, is, Mr. Speaker, owed to matters related to land acquisition. Mr. Speaker, the actions we are taking are as follows. In line with the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, we have committed ourselves to complete all the ongoing projects. Number two, we are having, Mr. Speaker, negotiations with contractors. Within the last 6 months, Mr. Speaker, when we have been able to secure some amount, we have given the magnitude of the pending bills. Mr. Speaker, given the magnitude of the pending bills, this amount was spread thin among service providers and contractors could not be able to go back to site and resume works. And remember, Mr. Speaker, this spreading thin is not as a result of decision of the ministry, it's the budgeting by this august House. Consequently, Mr. Speaker, as a result of that situation, we have had to resort to a situation where we are requesting the National Treasury to allow us to negotiate with contractors who are willing to resume works. It is through the resumption plan that a few road projects across the country have resumed, and you've seen some of them. We are launching them. And Mr. Speaker, it's important to say this in this very important chamber, that, Mr. Speaker, you have seen us even relaunch projects that were initially launched almost 8 years ago because they were long forgotten, like the case where the president was launching a project in Nyandarua County recently. And I know many people are concerned why it's being launched again. Because, Mr. Speaker, if a project has stayed for more than 7, 8 years, it's long forgotten. And, Mr. Speaker, it needs to be given a new lease of life. It is like, Mr. Speaker, being redone for the first time. Mr. Speaker, working with the National Treasury and in keeping with the economic plans of the government in the current financial year, Mr. Speaker, to stop borrowing, it is expected that in the next financial year, the economic situation will have improved to enable resumption of access to funding on affordable terms. And Mr. Speaker, we know that, Mr. Speaker, as a result of the financial situation we have and the economic situation we have in the country, there was a decision, Mr. Speaker, to stop continued digging of the financial hole. And as a result of that, Mr. Speaker, projects have been unable to be to resume on time. But we have, pursuant to advice from Treasury, we've been patient, Mr. Speaker, because we were told if we keep in with the financial plan that the Treasury has for this financial year, in the beginning of the next financial year, we might be able to access financial support and lending, Mr. Speaker, at affordable terms for us to borrow and clear the remaining projects. Mr. Speaker, another measure we've undertaken is that, Mr. Speaker, we are not starting any new project unless they are funded by developing partners on concessional terms, or if this House, Mr. Speaker, allocates funds to deal with emergencies, such as security roads or access to new government projects, for example, dams, hospitals, public institutions, or new housing projects. We appreciate, Mr. Speaker, the bilateral and multilateral development partners for their immense support on concessional terms. This has enabled us to start new projects that otherwise we could not have done. Allow me, Mr. Speaker, to use this opportunity to mention the Horn of Africa Gateway Development Projects, which are funded by World Bank and African Development Bank as an example of this concessional support. and we have other bilateral support we receive from other lenders across the country. Cognizant of this financial situation, which, Mr. Speaker, has built up over the last 5 years, our first duty as a responsible government is to stop the situation from deteriorating further through concessional and affordable borrowing. Mr. Speaker, we decided recently to access the annuity fund to enable us, Mr. Speaker, continue this project. A meeting will take place tomorrow to ask the committee responsible for annuity fund to allow us to access 12 billion that is in the annuity account. This amount will enable us to pay some of the pending bills and hence bring some contractors back on site. And a number of projects will soon resume. Mr. Speaker, in this arrangement, I want to thank the contractors, Mr. Speaker, who, despite the situation we have been facing, decided to continue with the projects even way long after we've not been able to pay them. I want to, Mr. Speaker, you will see the report I have tabled. Some of the contractors, we owe them up to 17 billion shillings. Mr. Speaker, some of the local contractors, we owe them up to 5 billion. I totally appreciate them for their patience, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank some of the banks that, as a result of our intervention, have been kind to their contractors, because a number of them could easily have lost their property, Mr. Speaker, through auction as a result of non-payment of the facilities they have received because of our situation. Mr. Speaker, the tabulation of the same will be tabled, Mr. Speaker, and each member of this House will have an opportunity through your kind office to see, Mr. Speaker, the projects that they